Good afternoon to you all, and thank you first of all to the Waverley fraternity for inviting me to come and speak to you today about the Franciscan order. So just recently actually, I had one of our secular Franciscan members say to me that they had a new inquirer turn up to one of their fraternity gatherings. And this inquirer asked the members, "What makes you different? What makes the Franciscans different to other groups within the church?" And some people answered, "We're a people of prayer." And he said, "Well, aren't all Christians?" Okay, someone else said, "We live the Gospels." He said, "Well, very good, but so did the Anglicans." Another person said, "We love poverty." And he just had to look around the room to see how some people were dressed, and he wasn't convinced by that one. Other people said, "We are people of peace." Well, so are the Buddhists. "We are people who love creation." Well, very good, but so do the Greens. And the Greens certainly do not live up to very high standards of Christian values all the time. "What makes you different? Why should I join you?" were his questions. And in the end, there was no one who could really satisfy his longing to know. They never saw him again. But this fellow had a really good point. What makes the Franciscans different? All of the charisms that we often speak about, humility, poverty, penance, peace, these are common to many groups within the church and throughout the world, religious and secular. Yeah, sure, our friars look different when they dress in their habits, but is that the only difference, the way our friars are dressed? I think to answer this question, we need to go back to St. Francis himself. What made St. Francis different to someone like, say, St. Dominic? Well, everything. Francis was Francis, he wasn't Dominic. Dominic was Dominic, he was not Francis. God created them two completely different people. Did they follow Jesus in exactly the same way? No, and they weren't meant to. Jesus does not call everybody to follow him in exactly the same way, and neither did he when he walked this earth. Some people, like the apostles, he called to walk with him very closely and intimately, while other people he said to them, "Be a disciple, but go back to your homes." So in other words, there are many buses that take us to heaven, and each one will take you on a completely different route and a different journey where you will see different and new things. God had a different plan for St. Francis than he did for St. Dominic. He had a different plan for St. Francis than he did for St. Clare, and they were even more closely united in spirit. God had a different calling for St. Therese of Lisieux than he did for Mother Teresa of Calcutta. They all followed Jesus all the way to heaven, although they all took a very different number bus to get there. So what was one of the main charisms of Dominic? He was a preacher. Yes, St. Francis also preached, but not like Dominic did. St. Therese of Lisieux, or the Little Flower, St. Therese of the Infant Jesus, she was called to follow Jesus in the simple life of a cloister. Well, St. Francis also lived very simply, we know that, and he also lived a hermitage life. But Francis and Therese lived it very differently. Mother Teresa was called to serve the poorest of the poor. Well, so did St. Francis, but he certainly did not do it on the level that Mother Teresa did it. God called each of the saints to excel in an area of holiness and virtue. But what did God call Francis to excel in which made him unique? And it's a difficult question, but I think the answer is everything. Francis was called to excel in being perfect. Now, of course, all the saints were striving for Christian perfection. That's nothing new. And the likes of St. Teresa of Avila, she certainly wrote about the ways to perfection. And there are many saints who reached this goal. So then what makes St. Francis different? It seems that St. Francis achieved perfection on a different level to all the others. It is often said that St. Francis was the most Christ-like person to have ever lived, other than Jesus himself. Now, if that's not a good reason to follow St. Francis, I really don't know what is. St. Francis was simply called to be another Christ, a mirror of Christ, or we could just say the complete package. I think it's difficult to pinpoint any one particular charism with Francis. He lived all of them so well. He really was the full gospel. He lived every word of the gospel as perfectly as he could. Today, many people would simply say that Francis's greatest charism was his love for the animals and for the environment. Well, yes, he most certainly did love creation, but that is not where he begins and ends. To place Francis in the forest and to leave him there with all the animals and trees is completely missing the point of who he was. Francis does not begin and end in the forest. He was not a greenie, thank goodness. Francis begins in the crib and ends at the cross. Or perhaps we can extend that to both extremes and say Francis begins at the incarnation and ends at the resurrection. We don't place Francis in the middle of the forest. We place him in the middle of Jesus, of God, of the most holy Trinity. God was first in his life, God was second, and God was third. St. Francis was fascinated by the mystery of the incarnation, the very moment when God himself entered into creation and became flesh in the womb of the most beautiful woman, Mary. And he had a great love for our mother, as we all do, especially here in this beautiful church, Mary Immaculate. Francis understood the mystery of the incarnation as the crowning of all creation. Everything that has ever come into being was modelled on this one event. Francis saw that everything in all of creation could find its roots in the incarnation of Christ becoming flesh, and that's especially us. And this is why he loved creation, because in and through everything he saw the work and glory of God and was able to give praise back to his divine creator. The whole incarnation of Christ was clothed in poverty and humility from the crib to the cross. From a poor, humble birth in a stable to poor parents, he lived his whole life in poverty and humility, and then Christ, as we know, he died the most shameful and agonizing death, once again in complete poverty and humility, without anything. And this is what St. Francis fell in love with. And this is what he desired for his own life. The whole story of St. Francis is simply a mystical love story. He was head over heels in love with God. And this is where we too begin, together with St. Francis, at the incarnation, in complete awe and wonder, with an incredible love, reverence, and a holy fear of God. But for St. Francis, it wasn't enough just to be in love. He wanted to become love. He wanted to be perfectly united with Jesus, with all the bumps and bruises, with the nails and all. Now, perhaps some of you know the legend that St. Francis was actually born in a stable, in a crib. Nice little story, I won't get into that one now. But we all know how it ended, with the cross, with the stigmata, with the crucifixion wounds of Jesus in Francis's own body for the last agonizing 2 years of his life. In receiving these wounds, these sacred wounds, St. Francis became the perfect mirror of love, the mirror of Christ. He was the whole package, from the crib to the cross, and nothing less. So I'm sure you all know pretty well the story of St. Francis. Despite being born in a stable, he was actually born into a wealthy family. He had everything: money, wealth, luxuries, and he was also very hungry for self-honour. God did not give St. Francis a difficult life from the beginning. Francis had to really work hard at making life difficult. Lately, I've been reflecting quite a bit on the Our Father prayer. Jesus taught us to say, "Our Father, give us this day our daily bread." And what are we saying here? We're asking for the most basic need known to mankind: bread. I mean, that's about as basic as you get. If you haven't got bread, then you are really very poor. If you think of the most desperate beggar on the street, what they really need more than anything is bread, food. Francis became that beggar. "Our Father, I am poor. I rely on you for even the most basic of needs. Give me this day my daily bread." And what was that bread? What is that bread? Jesus. He is the most important need in our life. Without Jesus, we are truly the poorest of the poor. And Francis found Jesus in the greatest treasure we have on earth, the Eucharist. And it's interesting that out of all the writings of St. Francis that still exist today, the one topic that he writes about more than anything else, and it's not the environment, it's the Eucharist. And this is where St. Francis is asking us to be, as Franciscans, and all of us as well, to be poor, humble beggars in the eyes of God our Father, pleading to our Father to give us the one thing we need in our life more than anything else, our daily bread, Jesus. And this is why a strong Eucharistic life is at the core of who the Franciscans are. Now, I should probably also clarify, what do we mean by poverty? We Franciscans use that word quite a lot, and it's often misunderstood. We're not required to sell everything and give all the money to the poor. In the days of Francis, the friars and the nuns, they were required to give up everything and live this radical poverty. But even in those days, St. Francis never asked that of the third order brothers and sisters. In fact, he encouraged them to remain in the world, keep their day jobs, earn a living, and provide normally for their families. So for us today, as secular Franciscans, poverty is not about having nothing. No, because we do need things. But rather, we live a poverty of spirit, as did the original third order brothers and sisters, in which we do not have an unhealthy desire or love for our possessions or for wealth, where we empty ourselves from any desire of power, honour or prestige. We only love God and the things that come of God, such as our brothers and sisters, our neighbours, works of charity, and yes, creation as well. So here we are today as Franciscans. How do we do it? How do we live this today, especially in a culture which has become so full of itself? We have become so gluttonous for extravagance, self-indulgence, pleasures and excessive luxuries, love for money and wealth, that we practically have no more room left in us to let in even a little bit of Jesus. God probably looks at our world today and thinks to himself, where can I enter? These people have completely filled themselves with the love for everything of the world, that they have no more room left in them for the love of anything of the spiritual. of God. So how do we become another perfect mirror of Christ in today's world? To be a Franciscan or to do Franciscan well is really hard, but it's not impossible. Because once you get on that bus, St. Francis is driving. As I mentioned before, we have 3 orders, the first, the second, and us, the laity, the third order. What is one thing that we all have in common? Actually, there's probably lots of things we have in common, I should hope so. But one of those is community, or fraternity. We live together with one another, or the first and second orders do. So the first order friars, they live together as brothers. The second order, the nuns, they live together in community as sisters. And we, third order, well, we don't live together, which is probably a good thing most of the time. But that's why we place such a strong emphasis on our monthly fraternity gatherings where we do come together with one another. But why is community so important? St. Francis, before he became a very holy man, when he was just Francis on his own, discovering his calling in life, even though he was Francis, he was not yet a Franciscan. St. Francis would quite simply have failed to have established the Franciscan order had God not sent him brothers, a fraternity. And I dare to say that Francis would have failed to reach the heights of Christian perfection if God had not sent him his brothers. Because it is precisely in fraternity where they helped each other, where they guided and formed one another. Sometimes that bus ran out of fuel and the brothers were there to give it a push start. It's a bit like playing a sport. When you work together as a team, when you all play according to the same game plan, you achieve your victory, the prize. The brothers learnt a lot from St. Francis, but he also learnt a lot from them. Fraternity. This is what keeps those wheels moving in the Franciscan order. When we see one of our brothers or sisters struggling to reach that heights of perfection, we are there to keep pushing. When we see one of our brothers or sisters lose sight of that vision, we are there to open their eyes. If I can go back to that fellow I mentioned at the beginning who wanted to know how we are different, I would say to him that in this particular fraternity here in Waverley, there is something that you will not find in any other fraternity, any other church group, any Christian group anywhere in the world. Something completely unique. In this fraternity, you will find Stephen, Salvatore, Barry, Tim, Susie, Susanna, Father Joseph. They are a family. You won't find them anywhere else. And this is what makes us different. These brothers and sisters here in this one fraternity are striving for Christian perfection. They don't expect anything less. They're not striving just to be preachers or charity workers or just pure contemplatives. They are striving for the complete package, to be another Christ, nails and all. In the spirit of our seraphic father, St. Francis of Assisi. And they are not going to achieve this on their own. They need one another. They have gotten on the bus where the wheels could very easily come off, but they work as a team to keep it going, to keep it moving and get each other over that finish line. They walk together in times of happiness, sadness, trials, errors. Why? Because that's just what families ought to do. So how are we different? Our family surname is Francesco. We belong to the same spiritual family of St. Francis, and we follow in his spiritual charism, which is different to the spiritual charisms of other saints who established different orders. If you don't like this family, that's okay. Move on, find another one. But good luck trying to reach Christian perfection on your own. I don't think anyone in this fraternity claims to have reached sanctity quite yet. I think some of them are very close. Simply joining the Franciscans doesn't make one holy, but I believe it is a very powerful path to holiness, and this is evident by the sheer number of Franciscan saints and blesseds which we have produced. In fact, I believe the Franciscans have produced more saints than any other group in the Church. And I don't think that any of these saints would have achieved that goal on their own. So to any visitors with us today, I say to you, if you hold the incarnation of Jesus at the centre of who you are, and if you desire to be another Christ, from the crib to the cross, in the spirit of St. Francis, then here in this fraternity you will find a family who is willing to help you and to be with you along in this journey, and who will do everything they can to make sure that you achieve that goal of Christian perfection. Who are the Franciscans? We are a family. And all of you here are most welcome to be part of it.